Hey, this is Christian Roldan,
and Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
and you're listening to
This is Nos Audietis.
This episode of Nos Audietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Audietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ray Gibbs through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Lodero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is gonna do it!
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
That podcast says cheated!
You wanna win? This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Welcome to another episode of Nos Audietis, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. We're recording on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. I am your host, Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our engineer, Lickett. The long Civic nightmare is finally over. The Sounders beat the Timbers on Sunday, ending a 6-game winless run that stretched all the way back to 2021. I wouldn't say the Sounders did it in anything like high style, but it was a satisfying win nonetheless. After giving up the first goal, the Sounders came roaring back to tie the score on a somewhat speculative shot from Christian Roldan that took a favorable deflection and beat keeper Maxime Crépeau. The Sounders then pulled ahead on a masterful Raul Ruidiaz goal, hitting a first-time shot with his left foot from about 20 yards out that floated ever so gracefully over Crépeau's head. From there, the Sounders kind of shut it down for the final 40 minutes, but for all the possession the Timbers had, they only managed 4 shots and never looked particularly dangerous. I don't think this is how the Sounders want to necessarily play, but we're not at a point where we can really be too choosy. Aaron, how encouraged were you by not just this game, but that they're now on a 4-game unbeaten run?
I think that the 4-game unbeaten run is definitely the place to focus your positive energy, I would say. This game, I'm thrilled with the outcome in this game. I think that games against the Timbers are going to be like this a lot of the time. For every game where the Sounders get the doors blown off or they blow the doors off the Timbers, you've got 6 or 7 pretty much exactly like this that are tense. Not a lot happens. And, you know, it's narrow margins or a draw. This was a pretty standard Sounders-Timbers game. I do think that the Sounders going down early against the Timbers on the road and forcing their way back into the game and then just completely shutting down the Timbers from there on out, I think that's super encouraging. I think that the thing that I think I have, and I think to some degree you as well, your big concern has been obviously the play, but the potential for a spiral, right? For pretty decent performances that could use some sharpening up in front of goal, getting guys back and healthy. Waiting for that could turn into just a total downward spiral, which kind of looked like it was coming in the Vancouver game, for example, right? And I think that we've gotten a lot of evidence and probably no evidence better than in this game that hasn't happened yet. And maybe we're not really at risk of that happening anytime soon. And so I think that's encouraging for sure. And, you know, the game state in this game, the Sounders didn't really have to do a whole lot after the second goal. And it would be great if they could have scored 4 or 5. But I think they're in a situation now where if you're getting a good result on the road against a rival, the important thing is to try to see it out. Look for your opportunities, sure, but trust in your defense, which has been elite once again all year, to get the job done. And they did. The Timbers looked just completely toothless, you know, for 90% of this game. And
yeah,
you got to feel good about a win on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is plenty of room for frustration over the way they played offensively. They didn't generate a lot of high high quality chances, but they didn't really have to. And I think that's kind of one of the important notes here is that there is a, like you mentioned, there is a game state aspect of this, is that like when you're up 2-1, you don't need to be crashing the box and throwing numbers forward and doing all the kinds of things that we want the Sounders to be doing. And it, I think it was I think they played this game sensibly. I was very encouraged. Like, I think maybe the most encouraging thing that we've seen these last couple games is Brian Schmetzer, who we have beat up a lot over his unwillingness to take out veterans and replace them with young guys, not just in a starting lineup, but like even in games. These last 2 games, the players he's turned to see games out or to try to pull out results have been young players, and the guys that he's been taking off have been the veterans. Guys like João Paulo, Albert Rusnak, even Jordan Morris came off in this game, not too early, but he's making moves that I think are at least getting closer to what we wanted to see, right? Like he is trusting, putting some trust in younger players. And so I find that's all encouraging to me. I think the other thing, just kind of more broadly speaking, is like this was the stretch where we were worried about the wheels sort of coming off, because they were entering this stretch of games where the games were just coming fast and furious. Between April 27th and May 29th, they're going to end up playing 9 games, I think. And because they was going to be, or no, they'll play 10 games. They were going to play one more than that, but they got the June 1st game moved, which ended up working out pretty well for them. But they're halfway through this stretch, and so far they're 2-1-2. I'll take it. This is looking like it could be a stretch of the season where, rather than sinking the season, it sort of rights the ship. And that's, so like they've got a long way to go. Don't get me wrong. Like the schedule does not get easier for these next few games. In fact, I think you can argue this is like the harder part of the schedule, but I'm for the first time optimistic they can get results.
And I think one of the things that's really encouraging for me is that the Sounders defense has been elite all year, all of last season as well. They're not leaking goals. They haven't had that problem really for quite a long time. So it's not like they're chasing the game in every aspect. They know they've got a solid defense. They know it's going to be tough for teams to score on them. And when you've got a situation like going into RSL on Wednesday, where it's a very good team, but you feel confident, you have experience knowing that you can keep good teams off the board, it just makes it a little easier than when you go in feeling like you're going to have to score a goal or two to take anything from the game. Mm-hmm. And that just, it gives you more of a platform to success. And when you're able to get a couple of wins in reasonably quick succession and not feel like you have to win every game to get back into the race. The Sounders are 3 points below the playoff line now, with most of the season left to play. Yeah. It's not good. Like you said, there's still a lot of work to do. The schedule is still extremely daunting, but it doesn't feel just like a black hole and completely insurmountable now. It feels pretty achievable to get right back into the thick of the playoff race. And I wouldn't say the vibes are fixed by any stretch of the imagination, but things are really headed in the right direction. The team is hopefully going to start getting healthy soon. Healthier. They're never going to be fully healthy. I think we can say that with pretty high level of confidence at this point, but they're getting big pieces back, hopefully. And it is, you talk about the younger kids getting more of a chance. I think that Schmetzer sometimes needs a proof of concept, right, to feel comfortable doing things. And I think against the Galaxy, he got that proof of concept where he sees the kids in training and they're not at the level that a lot of the regulars are, right? Because they're not expected to be yet. They're younger. They don't have the experience. But when he sees what their energy and their willingness to try things and their lack of frustration or whatever it is that's maybe holding some of the regulars back, and sees that in practice in a game and sees how that can be beneficial, then things can start to snowball a little bit in a more positive direction with regards to usage patterns and things like that. And I think having that energy to come in late in the game to close things out is really nice. I mean, it's one of the things that made even some of the positive results this season not the most pleasant watching experiences. Was that
when the kind of body language sucks?
And just the knife edge that everything felt like, right? Because you had these players that had played like 180 minutes in a week, slogging through the last 5 minutes against the Union, for example, where you're getting a result, but it just felt so hard, and it didn't feel that way against Portland really at all.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I thought that the energy, like they were still fighting, they were still, like all the markers that you want to see of a team that looks like they are they're up for it, for lack of a better term. And while we're on the subject of things that aren't quite fixed, we're gonna get a good test against RSL, I think. And I don't necessarily think that the Sounders need to win this game. They might not even need to get a result in it, but I think it's an important game for them to continue to show the same type of energy. But this the Whitecaps game on the weekend is a big test, right? Like it is. That's they got to start winning some home games. They've had a fair amount of success on the road, which has been good to see, but they also need to be able to carry that into home games. And I think for the vibes to really change, and I think if we're talking about getting fans sort of believing in this again, they got to show them something at home. And I think that's where you have a lot of, and I'm hearing this a lot, and I think it's totally justified, that the fan frustration is not, it's not just that they are playing uninspiring soccer. It's that at home, it's particularly dire. Like, I don't know, like, okay, so the Montreal game was fun. That's great. But on a week to week basis, there's not, I mean, it's, they've got outside of the Montreal game, I don't know that they've scored an open play goal at home.
Yeah, I don't think they have. Yeah,
because they scored a penalty against the Rapids. They didn't score against Austin. They didn't score against the Galaxy, and they didn't score against Vancouver.
Yeah.
So that's the 4 other games that they've played at home, and that's that starts to beat folks down, and and so that's really where this has to change. That said, from a practical perspective, they're now at a point where they don't have their heads above water, but they are at least sort of able to bide themselves. They appear to have bided themselves some time to get Pedro de la Vega back, which presumably will inject some energy back into the team. And then if they can get, if they can be around the playoff race during in the summer, and they actually make some signings, maybe there can be a real paradigm, between De La Vega coming back, and you can kind of talk yourself into, okay, maybe there is something really here where it's not just about making the playoffs. I mean, like, it should never just be about making the playoffs for this team, right? It should always be about aspiring to something bigger than just making the playoffs. And I think that there's reason to believe that that can happen. One of the areas I did want to get into, and we're going to deal with some of this stuff in the second segment too, but I want to focus in on Raul Ruidiaz in this game, where I think it was sort of a perfect encapsulation of the good and bad of Raul, where he scores an absolute golazo. And I guess, we've talked a lot on the podcast or in the Discord about repeatable actions. And I think where I'm coming down is the goals themselves are not necessarily repeatable actions, but if he can consistently score golazos, like, I don't know, maybe that's repeatable.
Yeah, I think that Raul is a player that scores great goals, and he always has been. And I feel like that is not the part of his game that has dropped off. So I think we get hung up on the XG or whatever of a single chance.
Right.
And so we see something as a low XG chance, and it's like, well, that doesn't count almost. But Raul has scored a fair number of low XG goals over the course of his career. I think the problem with Raul is not the great, impressive low XG goals that he's been scoring. Certainly not the penalties either, because people also want to kind of discount his penalties. And I get that, right? It's not the same as scoring an open play goal, but it is pretty nice having a guy that is almost automatic from the penalty spot. That's not a bad thing to have on your team. But the problem is all of the other goals he's not scoring, right? Like he's not scoring inside the box.
He's not making the runs inside the box. That's the thing that worries me, I think, is that he's not even making that run anymore.
Yeah. And that is the thing that separated prime Raul from a very good MLS striker. Was he did all the things a very good MLS striker did and the other stuff that very few MLS strikers did. Now he's doing the things that very few MLS strikers do, but without the other part that makes up the bulk stuff of your it's just the contribution isn't the same. And I think that obviously Raul's primary value, I don't want to say any striker, but Raul's primary value to this and any team is going to be his goal scoring, and he's not doing that. But I don't think he's been bad in other phases of the game. Like, I think he's much better this year than he was last year because he is scoring some goals. And he's doing a lot of hard work off the ball. And I think he's been pretty good defensively. He's pressing well. All that stuff is great, right? Like, I don't think that if you look at his performances in isolation removed from the context of the team or his contract, I think he's been an above average player this year. But that's not who he is supposed to be. It's not who the team needs him to be, maybe more importantly than that. And and so I totally understand the frustration with him, but I do feel like sometimes that can lead to a tendency to sort of devalue the things that he is doing well. And scoring goals like this is something he's always done. And it's I think probably one of the last skills that's going to go, right? Because it's not about athleticism or explosiveness. It's just about pure skill and vision and a willingness to try shit.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly willing to try shit. It was one of the funny things. I was looking at the stats from this game, and he tried for this for the second time he tried to chip the keeper from near midfield. It didn't come off, and I was kind of looking at the data around that, and I was shocked to see that it's unlike the previous one, which had different factors when going into it. I think the big factor was it was the first touch directly off a turnover, which is always going to be a relatively high XG chance, no matter where you shoot it from, apparently. But this one was more of a I'm going to have a go here. And it was worth 0.01 XG. But what was crazy is it was worth 0.54 XG OT, which seemed very counterintuitive. That means that if you get that shot, basically what it's saying is like, if you get this shot on frame, it's going to go in half the time. And to me, that seemed kind of wild. But I guess if you really think about it, if you're putting that shot on frame, chances are it's probably going to be a goal. He scuffed it, and it didn't come off, obviously. But I don't know. I almost wonder if the Sounders feel like they've identified like a quirky thing where it's like, no, Raul, actually that's a good shot. Like there used to be a saying back when I was playing basketball and sort of the Loyola Marymount system was coming into vogue. There was this idea that that the best time to shoot a three was on the break, because that was your best chance to get a rebound from it was in that same situation. And it was sort of a counterintuitive idea. And I'm almost wondering if it's a similar idea here where it's like, no, actually trying to chip the goalkeeper is good. Like, take that shot.
If it could lead to a team as exciting as those Loyola Marymount teams were, that would be great. I mean, that was as good as basketball ever was for me. But I mean, it's interesting. I have no problem with those speculative shots, really, because they're generally coming from a situation where there's not a lot going on in the attack.
Right.
I guess in this situation, maybe there was other stuff going on in the attack that this could have snuffed
I
out.
mean,
But
yeah.
it's early. You're at midfield. There's no risk of it turning into something the other way. Quite the opposite, in fact. Like, your defense is never going to be better set up for it, and he's
Right.
done it before, and not just this season. I'm totally fine with those kinds of efforts. It's the ones from 28 yards into 10
Yes.
sets of legs that are maybe a little more frustrating for me.
Yeah, and I will say the other thing about attempting those chips, and it's sort of like the same thing as when you keep trying Panenkas and they keep working, it sort of
Yeah.
becomes this gamesmanship thing. And, the part of the reason that chipping the goalkeeper is, or even attempting that is useful, is because you're basically forcing the goalkeeper to stay on and, to be more conservative. And so he's not able
Yeah.
to come out and play balls that he might otherwise play. And you get him thinking about that stuff. And so, I guess these are my point. We got off track here, but I guess the reason I brought it up was just that I think, Raul does seem to be doing some good things. I don't know that he's a particularly great use of a DP. This is something we can talk about in the next segment, but I thought it was worth bringing up here. One of the other things I wanted to talk a little bit about and to focus on the Portland game was the way it was, how physical this game was. Like, if you just look at the fouls, there weren't that many fouls, but I think there were only 18 fouls called in this game. But this was one of the most physical games I've seen played. And at first it was very frustrating the way that Alan Chapman was not calling fouls, but he was so consistent about it.
Yeah.
And that it was hard. It was like, and the game never did get out of control. And it was like the players, because I actually thought he managed it okay, and it gave it a different flavor than we're used to seeing. I don't know that I want to see every game played like that, but
Right.
it worked. It kind of worked, and I think the Sounders really it worked for the Sounders, especially, I thought.
Yeah. I think that I'm with you in that if I had the ability to set the precedent for this is how we're going to call games, that's way too physical for my taste.
Yeah.
And I think it led to a lot of the caginess and a lot of the lack of fluidity in attack for both teams.
Sure. Yeah.
But my problem with the way these games usually get called, when the idea at the outset is to let them play, is that the referees let them play and let them play and let them play until they don't. And it becomes really tightly
Right.
called. And it's
Yes.
almost, as a rule, going to be unevenly called at that point, because one team's going to have the lead. And so the other team is going to have more incentive to be a little more physical, blah, blah. Anyway, so if you're going to have that precedent, you're going to set the precedent, you've got to follow through. You've got to let it stay that way the whole game. You can't decide in the 80th minute, okay,
Right.
now I'm going to start handing out cards.
Right.
And yeah, I thought, Chapman is not my favorite referee, but I do think he is generally pretty consistent and even with the calls. And, I understand the inclination to say in a game like this, we are going to allow more to happen. And I don't have any complaints with the refereeing, which is, not maybe normal for me, but it was. I'm hoping that the next one is maybe a little more tight, though, because it was a little Scottish Premiership type action at times.
There were a couple instances where there was like a tackle that it's like, oh no, that's going to be a foul. And then the other team had a very similar tackle. It's like, well, and you're used to sort of seeing the second one get called
Right.
almost every single time. And I will say it takes something for a referee to be like, nope, I just let that exact thing go. I'm going to let this one go
Right.
too. Yep. And
Yep.
I'm going to go, that one's going to go too. Yep. Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you getting it yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. It can be, those games are actually more fun for me to watch as a neutral,
Yeah.
because you can definitely see and appreciate the calling it both ways a little more than when it's your guys getting crunched,
Yeah.
But I really, I do think he was quite neutral, call it right down the middle. It was just quite agricultural out there,
Yeah. I at one point I remember saying to myself, like, Felipe Mora is not going to get a call. Like that was that's the striker for the Timbers, and it just seemed like he never really adjusted to the way it was being called. And I guess Christian was sort of the same way too, where he kept waiting, like really expecting a call. Like there was a play that was right around the time that Rui Diaz attempted that chip, where Rui Diaz Roldan gets tackled, and it's like it's one of these things where the guy gets the ball first, but he fully cleans Roldan's legs out, and you're gonna see that called 90 out of 100 times probably.
Yeah.
That's called all the time now, and it was just like there is no way that was gonna call in this one. It's like, no, he got ball first.
Yeah, it did seem like the teams kind of figured it out later on, and they almost self-regulated. Like they were
it never got out of hand. It never
because I think that where the escalation and the inclinations to be actually dangerous come into play is when you're like, why aren't we getting any of these calls?
Yes, I agree with you.
And as long as it's both ways, it's like, well, I don't want to. Since he's not calling anything, I don't want to go in studs up and have the same thing happen to me, 5 minutes later. So it's about all you can ask for, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just reiterate that I thought like so many times in the last couple years, it seems like the Sounders have not been able to rise to the Timbers intensity level. Like they just didn't quite grasp that the Timbers were a desperate team and they needed to be too. Right. And this was a game where I felt like the Sounders did. Like they understood like I hesitate to use this analogy because it I don't really like it, but I do think there's this element of trench warfare where it's not so much, it's just the idea that the ground that you're claiming matters, right? And so Stefan Frei sort of talked about this in the post game where you clear the ball and you move your lineup 5 yards, and then you clear and then you win the ball back and you clear it and you move your lineup 5 yards more, and you just keep forcing the opposition to start their possession sequence a little farther back. You force their frontline players to drop a little bit more, and you just create this space in front of your goal that gives you some cushion. And we saw, like the Timbers had like I said, they had 4 shots over the last 40 minutes. All of them were from 22 yards out or farther. They were barely getting touches in deep in the Sounders end. And I think that was sort of that mentality of like, we just got to push the game farther away from our goal. We don't need to we don't need to necessarily play the game on their half, but we just got to make them push it farther out. And it didn't, like we said, it wasn't pretty soccer. It wasn't expansive soccer. It's not inspiring soccer, but right now the Sounders aren't in a position to like be choosy about the way they're getting results. And if this is how they got to get results,
especially against the Timbers. I think that
especially against the Timbers, exactly.
Like if there's something that can mentally turn things around, I think finally breaking the duck against the Timbers after 3 years now is the thing. Like if the team needed an emotional spark, that really feels like it could be it. And to win a game like that in Portland. Yeah. They have to break their lockers,
break their lockers.
Nice.
I asked Adrian today if he got a bill from Merritt for the locker room, and he just sort of laughed. He's like, I'm sure I'm going to get one.
Yeah. I think that's probably okay. I think he can probably swing it.
You happily pay that inflated price, whatever it is.
Yeah. I think I definitely understand the desire to get back to fun attacking soccer.
Yes.
And I think we will at some point. But I do not think that this is a game where you can be upset that you didn't get it. Because I think even in the best of times, you frequently did not get it from this game.
No, and if this was a 2-1 win over Minnesota United or pick a random Western Conference team at home, I think I'm a little more frustrated with the way they're playing. But this week, I'll take it.
Absolutely.
This RSL game, if they want to grind out a 0-0 tie, I will not complain. I will not complain at all.
However they want to beat Vancouver, if they beat Vancouver.
Sure,
that's fine
I'll
too.
even take it right. But at some point, I want to see better play. But for now, I'm satisfied with results.
Right, unless they
go all the way out
get
to the Phoenix Open Cup game result is fine.
Yeah, unless they get enough results that they rocket back into the top of the table.
Right, then I want to.
Then I don't care.
Soccer. Right.
Yeah, I just want to keep winning. So
yeah, sure.
There's a very narrow sliver where I actually care about good soccer. I guess is what we're learning.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, we're gonna do. We got into this habit. We've started doing question segments as part of the normal episode, and I guess we're going to do that again in the next segment. So come back, listen to our mini mailbag episode that we'll be doing in the second segment. This is Nos Audietis. Welcome back to Nos Audietis. So we are doing a little mailbag here. I'll just remind everyone, we field these questions from our Discord. If you want to get involved in the Discord, even if you just want to lurk and see what people are talking about, you just have to become a Sounder at Heart subscriber at the $75 a year level, or the supporter level is what we actually call it. And it's a good time in there. We've been, we have almost 600 people in our Discord now. That seems like a lot to me.
It's a lot of people. Yeah.
So, take that for what you will. But if you want to come, just shoot us an email. We'll get you all set up and you can ask questions. So, Aaron, what do you got for me?
All right. First one is from third string star. Where are the Sounders with Leo Chu at this point? It's clear Brian isn't keen on playing him, even though he always seems to contribute. Craig has brought in a more expensive option, and beyond that, the staff has slid Chu down to third choice with Jordan sliding over to left wing. What's the outlook for a player in this position? I can't help but feel like it's a major roadblock to this team. Should I be looking for a move this summer, or are they just going to keep him in this limbo? Seems unsustainable.
Yeah, I think you make some fair observations. It does seem like he doesn't have a totally clear role. I think part of that is he's been dealing with injuries this year. And so it's been harder to assess where he really is on the depth chart. And I think there's a lot of moving pieces here. So I don't know if he is out of favor as much as I think you're right though, that he doesn't have a clear role. And I don't know. I mean, if the Sounders could find someone to buy him at this point, they'd probably take that. But I don't think it's not dragging them down. I mean, he's not taking up a huge cap hit. They have an open U22 spot, so it's not really hurting the Sounders to have him. Might not be his ideal setup, but
yeah. I think the biggest frustration with Chu for me is that I like him. I like his game a lot. I think that he has severe limitations that get overlooked. And I think that the
real limitations, yeah.
And I think that the hope when he was signed was this is a player we're going to be able to develop and make a profit on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least break even on. He can be a contributor for a few years. And it just seems really unlikely that that's going to happen at this point. And whether that's just, it just didn't work out, whether that speaks to the team not being able to develop a younger attacking player, whatever it is, bad luck, who knows? It's not a great outcome, I don't think.
I would agree with that.
But I'm really hopeful that he can get healthy consistently the rest of the season and contribute. I mean, I think it feels to me, and this is based on nothing but observation, it feels to me like the odds of him being back next year are pretty low. because he would be back at a much higher cap hit, right? Like he
I
wouldn't
think
come
it's
back.
still. Well, I think if he's still. Well, let's look. If he has an option year, it'd still count as a U22. I don't
Well,
know.
in that case, that kind of changes things because he still could definitely have a breakout year and either become a key part of the team or somebody that they could move. But yeah, I
they
think
have
he's
another
going to
option
get.
year on him.
Okay, well that's good. That's good. I think he's going to get plenty of minutes down the stretch though for the rest of the year. Like I just think that there are too many games, and obviously Pedro de la Vega is coming back soon. Knock on wood. And will stay healthy, knock on wood. And so there's going to be competition, but I think he's going to get opportunities. I think he just has to really make a lot of them. And, people can say, well, he's scored a goal and he's contributed with assists and things like that. But I mean, we have a longer history than just this year, just the time he's played this year. And there's just been a lack of consistency. And I think that if he can establish himself as somebody that can be depended on and contribute game in and game out, that's going to do a lot for his chances to get significant minutes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is from Oscar Paul. He says, can we talk about and take a moment to appreciate the ability that Andrew Thomas had to throw the ball nearly half the length of the field? I love Fry, but that's clearly not something he has in his bag. Just curious if that added skill could help us become a more counter-attacking team and even lead to us actually scoring goals.
I feel like Steph did used to actually have a better arm. I don't know if he could ever chuck at the whole half of the field.
That was, I will just say that he's not exaggerating. Andrew Thomas threw the ball to midfield on a fly.
Yeah.
I actually don't know why he bothers kicking the ball at this point.
Right. He doesn't want to
because his
blow out
kicking
his
is
shoulder.
not very accurate.
Yeah, he doesn't want to tear labrum or something. Good
point.
It's impressive. I don't think that it's going to be like a Rory Delap game-breaking sort of thing that becomes a centerpiece of the Sounders' attack, but I could see a situation in which, that gets you out on the counter. And it's just cool. It's cool. It's a cool thing to be able to do. I love it. I really like Andrew Thomas a lot. I was ecstatic when they re-signed him, because I was worried about losing him for nothing, because Stefan Frei's got another year on his deal, and I think Andrew Thomas has shown that he can start in this league, and so yeah, I'm very glad that he's going to be around for a while, or at least if he's not, they're going to be able to get some real value in return, because he's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think it makes the Open Cup a lot, like it makes me really even more invested in the Sounders' success in the Open Cup, because I want to see him play. And I think I said this somewhere, but my impression is that he's going to get the Open Cup as long as the Sounders are in it.
Which is great.
Which is great. And I think that's how it should be. And he deserves that chance. And, it's, I enjoy watching him. He was a ton of that whole display. Like, we don't need to relive this, but that whole penalty shootout display was unreal.
It's extremely alpha thing to do, just to completely win the shootout single-handedly.
And then to taunt the opposing team, like, what did they ever do to you, dude?
Right. It's definitely some energy that the Sounders, I don't know if they've been missing, right? I don't want to say that has been responsible for anything.
Like,
as an entertainment product, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was very Hahnemann-esque. It just felt very I have to imagine, like, Marcus was there, and I have to imagine he was loving that. As much as anyone.
Definitely. All right, next one is from Sounder Pilot. Having watched the last 3 games, LAG, Louisville, some team south of Seattle, it seems like the youth on the team have been the ones bringing the fire and the drive to the game. While not always successful, they seem to be the ones pushing to do more and trying new things. Are we watching the rise of the next core of this team before our eyes?
I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think that's fair. That's a fair way of looking at it. And it'll be interesting to see how long an Obed Vargas sticks around. And, I don't know if we've really had much time to talk about his transformation seemingly into more of an offensive piece here. And that's not necessarily one of the players he's talking about, but that's, he's probably leading the charge. Then you have guys like Paul Rothrock, who's not really young, but brings that youthful energy. Dylan Tevez, similar, not necessarily young, but he brings sort of that youthfulness. Cody Baker, maybe a better example of a sort of a genuinely younger player who is also bringing kind of a level of tenacity and whatnot. And I think these are good things. Georgie Monongu is maybe another good example of a player like that. He played against LA. He probably is going to play tomorrow against RSL. So it's good to see these players brought into the team and being allowed to play roles. And I have long said that the thing that has bothered me about the Sounders' use of their roster is not using enough of it. And this sort of this part of the schedule has forced Brian's hand a little bit. But I think my hope is that he's learned he's kind of learning that, if you give these guys minutes and if you give these guys time, they can have a positive influence on things. So
I mean, I think that if your academy, if you never are producing players that you're selling on for huge fees, but it's producing key players like Josh Tencio and Obed Vargas, and it's producing most of the back end of your roster, right? The spots that used to go to who were some guys, Nathan Sturgis or who, what
That's
have
a good
you.
example. Sure. Yeah.
No offense to Nathan Sturgis, but if you can give
Noonan.
those minutes, Pat Noonan, even better example. What's he doing these days? If you can give the minutes that those guys used to get to your youth players, it's cheap. You're not having to give up resources to get them.
Yeah.
And one of them might turn into Josh Tencio, right? It's just such a huge upside of the academy. And I think a lot of the focus on MLS academies, because MLS has designs on becoming like a selling league, and it is really there in a lot of ways. The focus is so much on, are you selling players? Are you selling prospects to Europe and getting big fees? And obviously that's great if you can do that. But what the Sounders have gotten out of their academy over the last few years has really been, I think, great. I think exactly what you want to get from your academy.
No, I think that's, if you can regularly produce one or two players that you trust to give real minutes to, you're doing great, I think, from that perspective.
Absolutely.
All right, this is from Andrew. Assuming the Sounders don't move either Rui Diaz or Rusnak this summer, do you think they could or would bring in a player on a loan who is on TAM wages with an option or / obligation to buy in the winter, like the Galaxy did with Ibrahimovic, or like Cincinnati seemed to be doing with Kevin Kelsey?
I suppose it's possible. I think with Ibrahimovic, I don't think it was that straightforward.
These are two different categories, I think.
Right. I don't think Ibrahimovic's deal was that straightforward, but I think that the kind of move that's being envisioned here is plausible. I think maybe more plausible. I don't know. Maybe it's not more plausible. Another possible scenario would be the Sounders giving Rusnak an extension and bringing him back. The extension makes him a TAM player. He gets more years guaranteed for more, net value. I don't know if that's something they're interested in doing. I don't know if that's something Rusnak is interested in doing, but it's possible. I think I wouldn't be opposed to it. I like Albert. I just don't like him as a DP. And
I think that, I want to also put that out there. I'd co-sign that. I really like Rusnak's game. I think he gets a lot of undue criticism, but I fully recognize that he is not producing numbers that you want a DP10 to be producing right now. Like He's got 2 assists, which is actually more than he's had before this year, but you want more than that from him. You want him scoring goals. You want him setting up more direct scoring opportunities. You want him
Right.
playing like he did against Montreal, frankly. Like he looked like a DP against Montreal.
Yeah. And if he can get to that level, great. But I don't think that's
I
necessarily.
will say, yeah, I was just looking at Kevin Kelsey's sort of his like the loan. I don't know that doesn't necessarily strike me as a burgeoning DP situation. Like he's an interesting player, but he's 19, so I don't know necessarily that like they could bring him in as a U22 just as easily. So I don't know that's. I would hope that Sounders. My hope is that the Sounders sign at least a TAM and potentially a U22 this summer. That it seems like they would have that in the budget in the salary cap space.
Yeah,
which they should like. Those are real players, right? Those are.
Yeah.
So like they should be able to do something real this summer. It would be nice. I think what this person is sort of alluding to is setting themselves up for a bigger move that they probably need to make this next off season. And this sort of lays the groundwork for that. I would like it. Like I would, there's probably a chance that they could do it. I don't know how much hope I'm holding out for it, but
Yeah, they'd have to find a situation where the selling team is incentivized to have a deal like that, right? Like,
right,
where the benefit of having them off their wage books is higher than the potential benefit of hanging on to them and selling them 6 months down the line, right?
Right.
At the next window when the Sounders would be obligated. Because if that player sets MLS on fire and their value goes up $5 million, the other club is not going to be thrilled with that potential outcome.
Right.
They're going to feel like they're going to be maybe hesitant to make a deal like that. So, yeah. The next one is from the Joshua. How are these teams, Miami and LAFC specifically? I copied the wrong part of the question, but the rest of it should be fine. How are teams like Miami and LAFC able to afford these players with parity and roster constraints? Did they get offered something other than money? This is not just about Sounders, but aside from Miami and LA, no one gets these types of players. How many or why? Is it frustrating to other teams?
Yeah, I have to imagine that it's frustrating. There's a player currently with Miami whose name is escaping me. He's a Paraguay international. They just signed him, and he's a player who probably a few years ago would have been a DP type of player. And instead he's, and Miami has a roster full of these guys who seemingly are making a lot less than they could be making on the open market. I will say in the case of Olivier Giroud, he is a DP. So like there's no shenanigans there, but like a Gareth Bale, that was another situation where I don't think he's going anywhere else other than maybe Miami or LA on a non-DP deal. And yeah, the Sounders aren't getting kind of those players, I don't think. And I don't know how to feel about it. I guess it's annoying, but at this point I just feel like I'm numb to it.
Yeah, it is. It's one of the things you have to deal with in MLS. The Sounders have benefited from it. LAFC, whoever the new shiny is, gets to benefit from it. And it's not good, but it is what it is. And
Matias Rojas, by the way, is the player I was thinking of.
Yeah. Inter Miami is probably going to win the Supporters Shield. They're probably going to win I don't know about probably going to win the MLS Cup, but they've got to be the odds-on favorites. But Messi will retire at some point, and it'll, they'll lose the advantages, just like LAFC did, and just like the Sounders did. I mean, it's, and they're running out of expansion spots. So how much longer can they keep doing shit like this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I wish we had a better note to end on, and there's another question on here, but I think it's actually one that we already took care of last week. But
damn, I wanted to answer it. Oh well.
Did you have thoughts on the Sounders haircut? Because Mark opened up a whole can of worms on this one last week. He was bad mouthing bold people.
Well, they can't do anything about that. most of the time, right? That's not nice.
Why did you have something to add to this?
Well, I think that my general theory about youth fashion is that older people think it looks stupid because they remember it going out of style.
Oh, fair enough.
And so I think a lot of like the haircuts that kids have now, like they have bowl cuts and stuff,
Or the
and it looks
duckbill-
crazy.
The duckbill
Yeah.
haircut.
It looks crazy because and I think you have the right to make fun of anything you also made fun of when you were that age, like Jenkos and stuff. I thought that was stupid then, so I can still think it's stupid. But anything I had a bowl cut for years. I can't make fun of a kid with a bowl cut.
Right.
What am I doing? So
Yeah.
that's all. But if I'd known that, I would have picked a better one to end on.
Yeah, I should have done a better job of scouting of editing. Of pointing
I should have
this
listened to my own podcast, but
out. Yeah, we can't all be perfect.
I was traveling.
Yeah,
That's my excuse.
No. Well, thanks everyone for hanging out with us and us, getting this ready before the RSL game. So hopefully you listen to it, and hopefully if you listening to this after the RSL game, everything we said didn't get completely blown up by whatever happened in that game. So maybe I'm
Fortunately, this
apologizing.
isn't the important one. Right?
No,
the Vancouver one's more important. So
yes, it is. But well, with all that, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Full Pull Wines. I want to say thank you to all the Sounder at Heart subscribers out there. I'm finally getting finished up paying taxes from our first year in operation, and I'm reminded that we had a lot of subscribers. So
way to put a positive spin on it.
Yeah, that's I'm putting a positive spin on that. But with that said, I'm Jeremiah Shan signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is Nos Adietis, and remember, you will never get alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.